Just getting started a little bit early, a minute early, so I'll wait until a few people come on board. Can't tell if anybody's here yet. Doesn't look like it. Not 1:30 yet. Okay. I don't know how that works. So if anybody comes on board, say hello. Let me see who we have coming. I know sometimes I'm here just talking to myself, and that's fine too. I know it's the middle of a Saturday afternoon, so you may be involved in other things. But let's see. I think there's two of us on right now. So we'll wait and see if we get a few more. Yes, but you shouldn't speak. Okay, and so since our last time, I went in early on Wednesday morning to get a rotator cuff repair done on my right shoulder, and I am right-handed. So this week I'm getting a few days of recovery here in Havre de Grace, Maryland, and learning to work with my left hand. So we're going to see how all that goes. I'm going to give a few minutes here for a couple of folks to come on. Hoping we have a couple of folks back from last week. And if not, we'll just get on and have this as a live for to be disseminated in shorts later in the week. I give it just another 40 seconds. Hoping somebody comes on board. We'd love to have you, love to see you, love to hear your comments. And we're going to start in just 15 seconds. Okay, so we've given it time for people to come on board and not seeing too many just yet, but that's fine. Hopefully, a few will come on. And we're continuing discussion about authenticity. And I'm going to do a little bit of a recap of some of the thoughts, especially the verses that we used from Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. If you recall, we talked about those being generally accepted truths, pretty undeniable, the things that Solomon wrote in Ecclesiastes and Proverbs. Not too many people dispute any of the truth of those things. And they're not really religious sayings, they are simply sayings, they are simply truths operating in this world. And so we start with Ecclesiastes 8:3. Do not stand up for a bad cause. So we took some time with that particular phrase because some things begin with a good cause and become a bad cause as time goes on. Uh, Ecclesiastes 7:16 through 18. The man who fears God will avoid all extremes. So, again, on that same idea of standing for a bad cause, is the idea that we cling to something in such a way that um, we don't see anything else and it becomes an extreme for us. And so we're operating within an extreme that is out there somewhere, and it's not real. It's not authentic if it's just one extreme versus another. And then there's Proverbs 37, two things that Solomon asked of the Lord: keep falsehood and lies far from me. Solomon knew that that falsehood and lies is kind of a part of human nature, is that we find it easier to lie than to tell the truth many times. And so he was asking the Lord to keep that tendency from him. And then a very familiar one, Proverbs 18:17. And we've seen this play out a lot in the public marketplace in the last few years. The first to present his case seems right, till another comes forward and questions him. So we've seen a lot of that, where there are either no questions, or when the questions finally come, they've been shut down. So that's part of standing for a bad cause. Proverbs 18:2, a fool finds no pleasure in understanding. So again, the idea that if we're clinging to one idea, one side of a story, if we're looking at just one phase, one side of something, and we are not willing to look at anything else, then this proverb calls us a fool when we do that. And we all do it at times. I certainly have. And Proverbs 17:15, acquitting the guilty and condemning the innocent, the Lord detests them both. So none of us want to be acquitted as as being guilty when we aren't, and none of us want to be condemned when we are innocent. And yet, that happens often in our society and throughout the world. So those are the overriding truths that we're kind of embracing. And again, what we're looking at is not so much uh, general authenticity out in the marketplace as it is individual. We're looking at ourselves as individuals because that's where it all begins. And I had shared with you last time some of my own story so that we could kind of start there because the week previous we talked about how vulnerability is the beginning of authenticity, that it begins with us being vulnerable with someone else if we expect someone else to be authentic with us. And again, just to recap, I had lived many of my years anticipating, waiting on others to be authentic with me, when in fact I wasn't vulnerable enough to be authentic with others. And so again, we're looking at it as an individual thing. One question I did have from last week asked the question, well, what does authenticity look like? And I thought it was an interesting question because it must be so alien to us today that we're asking the question, what does it look like? And I thought I would answer that first by asking what it doesn't look like. I think as we consider the idea of authenticity, if we think in the marketplace of concepts and of groups and of uh, different things that are going on, you could probably list, if there were a few of you here, and there aren't right now, some things that are inauthentic. And so I just listed a few just to get us going. Hollywood and actors. I don't think any of us would think that any of that feels authentic, right? Real, honest. No, it's all kind of a mask game, right? Um, Politicians. When you say the word politicians, the first word that comes to your mind is not authentic. It's usually just the opposite, that they're there to win another term in the next election. Advertising, advertising. Well, we know that that's not at all authentic. It's simply trying to get at our emotions and causing us to see things their way so that we'll buy a product. And news organizations, they, they are not very authentic today because they're taking just one side of a cause and not looking at both sides of it. They're just seem to be have the tendency to just look at what they want to look at or what ownership of the station wants them to look at, and are not willing to look at all of the facts. And so we talked about that last time. And then government, we don't consider authentic. We've seen a lot of things come out lately that proves that it's not. We didn't need it to be proved. that it wasn't. We knew that it isn't. But again, those are the things that are not authentic, right? And so again, we're not looking so much at groups and organizations and to be authentic. We're looking at us as individuals seeking to be authentic, seeking to grow in this whole area of being honest, being real, being straightforward. And it's a challenge for us because one thing we mentioned last time is some of our attachments. And our attachments can be simply ideas that we have in our head. And maybe they came as a result of being raised in a family that had certain ideas. So let's look at an example. Let's say that you were raised in a family that had a prejudiced perspective. Now, when I use the word prejudice, that doesn't mean white against black. It means white against black or black against white or any ethnic group against another, because it happens in all of those realms, and we all have those tendencies to some degree. But if you were raised in a family that was kind of highly prejudiced towards another group, whatever group that might have been, then that's something that is in your head and affects what you do and what you think and how you react to circumstances and to other people. And so you can't be real with someone else if you can't see them for who they are because you've got this blockage in your head that there's something wrong with them or that you don't like them or that they have that they bring forth some sort of a negative impact into the situation and they don't. It's just what has been planted in our head maybe by a family that was very prejudiced and so we've seen that happen over the years and so that would be an example of an attachment that we have that we haven't thought it through and said, I'm going to be attached to this idea. It just happens by virtue of the fact that we are human beings. And as we are growing up in an environment, we are affected by that environment. And so it may be it may be a religious attachment. It may be that we were brought up in a family that had certain religious ideas and concepts that they clung to and that you acquiesced to as a child growing up and maintained over the years. So whether it's true or not, whether it's right or not, you maybe haven't assessed it but it may be that you're still operating on the basis of that mindset. So those are attachments that are just thoughts. Those are attachments that are just concepts. They're ideas that are there by virtue of families that we were a part of or our inclinations. So there are other things that we attach to as time goes on. And again, this is in that broader context of trying to be individually authentic and real and thinking about the idea of taking a stand for a bad cause. That's what Solomon wrote there. Do not stand for a bad cause. And so um, we can stand for a bad cause when the cause changes, but we don't, and we continue to cling to that. So I'll give you a popular one today, one that has been out in the news today that and I'll just kind of give you my perspective on it. And I look forward to any comments, whether after this live or during to comment on this because that's really what I'm hoping that we begin to have is an engagement and an interaction here. And so um, the idea that a few years ago that a term became apparent in all of our media that Black Lives Matter. Okay, so that's not a bad cause, right? That's a good cause. And so there's a woman that created a website that was titled that, and she got lots of money as a result of that. More power to her. Uh, she wasn't so much involved in too many of the transactions that were going on out in the marketplace as she was just took advantage of the fact that she could use that term to create a website, and she did, and it was very profitable for her. As the story goes, we know that she bought several homes, with some of that money that came in, and that was fine. That's fine. That's kind of the capitalistic way of doing things in today's world. But when Antifa kind of overtook that concept and that idea, um, and started tearing apart and burning and buildings and billions of dollars of damage done throughout the country, and it was to seven. I'm not sure how many lives were lost during that year or two period as well. And so it had become then a bad cause to cling to. It was no longer a good cause. It had been taken over by a movement, and that movement was not a good movement because it was doing bad things. It was harming people, and it was harming other people's property. Even small businesses that had worked for their whole lives to build up their businesses, and their whole building is burned down. And this was small business people. So my point is that a good thing can put my ear pod back in here, can become a bad thing. that 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 we never start out deciding we're going to stand for a bad cause. That doesn't make any sense. We would always start out deciding I'm going to stand for this, whatever the cause might be, and typically it's something good because there's always something good in everything. And so we find that and we begin to stand for it, but it changes and we don't. We continue to cling to it. So that becomes an attachment to a movement as opposed to an attachment to an initial idea or concept. So there are lots of ways that we can take a stand for a bad cause. So, um, so all of that said, um, going back to this idea that in today's world we are simply trying to find for ourselves, because that's where it all begins. What is authentic? What isn't? What's real? What's honest? What can I do in my own little world, my own realm? That's really all we're focusing on. We're not looking at the idea that what we do is going to affect the whole world, though it may, because as we as individuals change, then the world around us, however small or large that is, can change. And so we really just want to focus on ourselves. We want to think about what attachments that we may have, that we maybe cling to, that are not good, that are not right, that we maybe continue to cling to, even though things have changed. And so we want to think about that. We want to think about looking at ourselves honestly and looking at all of the facts. That idea that the first to present his case seems right until someone else begins to ask questions. And one of the questions I'd ended with last week is, might one consider he or him or herself authentic if not considering all of the facts about a given matter? That's the question I put out there, and hope to get some response back. That um, I obviously believe that you can't really be authentic if you're not looking at all the facts. Authenticity and realness and openness desires the light to shine upon it. It desires conversation. It desires the truth to be spoken and to be discovered and to be found, to be searched for, as Solomon writes in chapter 2 of Proverbs. He search for it as for hidden silver. And so when we're doing that, then we're probably really in search of the truth, of honesty, of authenticity. If we want it to be hidden, if we only want to see one side of the story, if we don't want to think about all of the ramifications of a given matter, then we better question whether or not we are standing for a bad cause. Because if we don't want the light to be shed on it, if we don't want things to be seen, if we don't want all sides to be discussed, if we don't want to be interacting with other people about all of the matters of a given situation, then we have to ask ourselves why. Is it because we don't want to look at the other side because of what we might see, that it might prove what we're thinking is wrong? That what we are clinging to is not any longer true or it never was true? We have to question ourselves on that level if this thing of authenticity is going to work for us as individuals. We've got to look at ourselves and ask the question, what is real? what is real for me? What am I looking at? Am I only considering one side of the story, or am I willing to look at every aspect of it? Am I asking all of the questions that need to be asked? For instance, our news media in days gone by used to be something that would ask questions. It was curious. It wanted to know, well, if someone, a politician said this or that or the other, it would dig deeper and find out, well, is that true or not? But today that doesn't happen very much. What happens is the commentator just takes in whatever the person is saying without asking them any questions. And so again, when we're doing that as an individual with ourselves, and that, again, that's the main concern here is that we're looking at ourselves as individuals. So when we're the commentary in the scene, interviewing ourselves, so to speak, trying to get at the bottom of what we really believe, are we willing to be honest with ourselves and ask ourselves the hard questions? Are we willing to look at the matter and say, oh, I need to look at every side of this? As I said, I'd gone through that period of time in my life where I was only looking at one side. I had experienced emotions and feeling, and I was only operating within that world. I had kind of dropped all of the other things that in my head I knew were true in my heart that I believed, and I set those aside for the sake of clinging to something that felt right. And so I had I continued to live in that realm of inauthenticity because I wasn't willing to relook at things. I wasn't really willing to look at what the bottom of the bottom is. I wasn't really asking myself the hard question. They finally got asked, and I finally began to answer them, and that's when you begin to get free and you begin to find authenticity and honesty when we eventually get to that place. But we have to ask ourselves the question: if we're not willing to look at all sides of the story, if we're not willing to, maybe it's a person that we have something against and in our mind, we've got certain things that we really believe are true about that person. But if we're not willing to either go to that person, that's the very best thing, and ask the questions, or at least if we're not able to access that person, maybe it's someone that's not really within our sphere of influence. But if we're not really willing to research the implications that have been made towards a person, and we just kind of hold on to, well, this is what has been said, so this is what I believe, or this is how that person hurt me, so that's the way that person is. No, that person might have just been in a bad mood that day and didn't mean to hurt you when they did that. So we got to go back to that person and get it squared away. And so that's when we begin to kind of get at the root of the matter. That's when we begin to deal with the matters that are really important to know that we're not, quote, "fooling ourselves." You remember that one proverb says that the fool, let's see, a fool finds, no pleasure, no pleasure in understanding. And so we're kind of acting as a fool if we're not willing to dig down deep and try and understand what's going on. And we're not doing that purposely. We're not saying I'm going to be a fool today. No, none of us do that. It is just that it is a reflection that if we're not digging deep for understanding, that's a reflection upon the idea that we have in that in that particular realm have become a fool. And so we need to admit it and dig deeper. And so those are the pieces of authenticity that we want to consider as we think through. I'm just looking at my notes here. Um, uh, Someone had asked about attachment, and let's see, attachments keep us from studying. Yeah. Okay, so the same person asked when I referred to what was another world, he was confused. And again, for me, I had been in a world of organization, an organized world, a particular religious world, a particular family environment, And, so when I said I went to a whole nother world, it was outside of all of that. It was, another, ethnic group. It was another, it was another socioeconomic class. It was, not bad people or good people. We're not looking at that on either side or the other. It was just different in that respect. So for in my mind, it was a different world. And again, when I experienced emotions there, then that began to awaken me to something that I had not really experienced in times past. And so, again, that felt real. It felt authentic. It felt like I was moving into the world of not of authenticity. That was what I was feeling. But again, if I'm only looking at that one side of it, and I'm not looking at any of the things that I know that I believed in the other world from which I had come, then I hope you see that then I was not living honestly with myself. And so that's what we want to challenge ourselves to do as we come together, and we're doing all of this within the realm of three huge concepts. And one is that we are an emotional being, so the idea of transform. The other is the idea of building. That is, that day in and day out, we're all doing something to earn a living, to live in this world, to put food on the table, to deal with one another. So that's the building piece of it, and that's where large numbers of our hours each day are spent. And then finally, the idea of pursuing, and that is, again, that I believe that we are all deep inside pursuing a deeper relationship with God, that we want something more than what we may have in that build world or in that emotional world. And we're trying to connect all of that. And again, that's my view of it. That's how I built this channel. Those three concepts: transform, build, and pursue. Also happen to align with the three books, the two that are already done, and pursue that is in the works now. And so all of that connects on that level. And so this matter of authenticity fits within that framework of wanting to live and move and have our being in him. I took that phrase from the apostle Paul when he was speaking in Athens, and he saw a sign on a that said to the unknown God, and so he went back to the marketplace, and that's what we're in here is in the marketplace, and he took that back to them and said, uh, I want to tell you about the unknown God, and so he had that conversation with them. You can see that in First Corinthians, and so I'm trying to use uh, that phrase at the end, yeah, or at the beginning of my videos these days so that we keep in mind that that's what we do. We live and move and have our being in one that is greater than us, and one that we don't fully understand and comprehend, and one that we are pursuing, and one that we want to know better, and one that is way beyond us. And the scripture says that the foolishness, that the wisdom of man is foolishness unto God. So God looks at us and smiles at our wisdom. We have lots of things that we've learned and a long way that we've come as human beings, but God has given us all of that. All good things come from Him. And so, if all good things come from above, then we have to accredit him with every good thing. So every good thing that comes out in the marketplace, that idea had to be planted there by someone. And I believe that that is the creator of all things. So when something new is created, or it looks like it's been created, we know that nothing is can be created or destroyed. But when a new product comes out, or a new idea comes out, or a new concept comes out, then we might accredit it to a particular individual. And so certainly that individual had a lot to do with it. From my perspective, there was something going on inside of him that was coming from God, and it brought that out. And uh, now, of course, we can abuse as well as use those good things. Those good things can be abused just as well as used for the good of others. So we're going to wind it up with that today, and uh, this will become shorts over the next week or so. We'll put that together, and it'll be coming out a few weeks from now. And so I look forward to seeing you next time and do hope that you live and move and have your being in Him today.